Welcome to Transitions in Leadership. I am Professor Omiyẹmi, Artisia Green, and I have the pleasure of being here with Renee Thomas, who's the Associate Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion at Purdue University. And Transitions in Leadership is an opportunity for us to hear from leaders who are in the field in higher education, with backgrounds or are adjacent to the arts, and for us to talk about their pathways to leadership and different theories on leadership development. This is a new offering from the Professional Development Committee, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to be here with you this evening, if you're with us live and or if you are catching us on the replay. And so the way the program will work is I have a series of questions that I will offer to our guest, which will have our, keep our conversation going. And then, we'll talk for maybe 30, 35 minutes, and then we'll open it up to questions from those of you who may be with us during the discussion. And then we will close with a hard stop at 7 p.m. tonight. And so, Renee, welcome. Is it okay that I call you Renee in this session?
Absolutely.
It's so good to see you here in this medium, in this way. Renee and I had the pleasure of working together when Renee was the executive director for the Black Cultural Center at Purdue University, and I was an artist in resident for the New Directional Players. And so it's just great to follow your career as you have followed my career, and for us to have this opportunity to reconnect over leadership in a different way for you now that you have been the Associate Vice Provost here in this role for diversity and inclusion for the past 3 years, after a long career as the executive director for the Black Cultural Center. So maybe the first question might be, and it's not one of the scripted ones that I've sent you, but this is a transitional question since the topic is transitions in leadership. You transitioned from one career to the next. And if you just might share with us a little bit about what inspired your transition to a different form of leadership in higher ed.
Well, Omiyẹmi, let me first begin by saying thank you for the opportunity to be here with your listening audience. I was so thrilled whenever you reached out to me. And I have, like you said, I have admired your work over the years and just so impressed with the quality of productions that you have produced, and just a joy to be here. As it relates to my leadership role, particularly at Purdue University and with the Black Cultural Center, I came to Purdue in 1990, 30 plus years ago, thinking that it was a 3 to 5 year commitment, and then I would be on to the next professional opportunity. Well, I found that the arts is where my passion was. At the Black Cultural Center, we have 5 different performing arts ensembles in dance, drama, theater, choral music, as well as photography. And as a result of my participation, I just found it to be a home away from home in terms of the Black Cultural Center. And we also had a catalog of guest speakers and performers that would come to the university, not only during Black History Month, but throughout the entire academic year. So I thought it was going to be a 3 to 5 year commitment, and then I would move on to the next professional opportunity. That 3 got a 0 behind it. It was 30 years. And it was like, wow, I can't believe I've been here 30 years. And I was able to reinvent myself and the programs at the center. And I think that that's what kept the work very fresh, is this opportunity to undergo a metamorphosis and become something different than what the organization previously was. We moved into a brand new state-of-the-art $3 million facility in 1999, and was instrumental in the fundraising campaign and the architectural elements, working with the artists to ensure that they incorporated some very distinguishable African elements into the design of it. I thought in 99, when we moved into the facility, I said, I'm gonna sit in this chair at least 1 year, because I worked so hard to get into the new facility. And then that 1 year, same story again. It just became longer and longer. And then I was at a point where I thought to myself, what is next, and how might you be able to create the next for you? And then that's when I began to seek out some more leadership opportunities at the university. Assumed a provost fellow role, a provost fellow for diversity and inclusion. And that was actually a 3-year appointment. It was intended to be 1 year. Then there was an opportunity to renew it and an opportunity to renew it again. And then I went back to the Black Cultural Center director position for about 6 months. And then the opportunity emerged to apply for the associate vice provost position. And I, at the time, I was like, nah, I don't think I want to do this full time. And then it was like, if you don't take advantage of this opportunity, you might regret it. And I did not want to live in a state of regret. So I applied and was the successful candidate after the search, and been in the role for 3 years now.
Wonderful. It's very inspiring. And you remind me of something that my provost here at William and Mary said to me, that sometimes you have to take advantage of the opportunity when it presents itself to you, right? So you prepare as a leader, and then you apply patience and you wait. But when the opportunity presents itself, to move and to move with no regret. So thank you for that affirmation. And we're following a similar journey because I'm currently in a provost fellowship now at William and Mary, trying to explore what the potential holds for me in leadership in higher ed beyond what we do in the classroom and what we've done before previously as Director of Africana Studies. So tell us a little bit about what you do in your current administrative role.
My position continues to grow and evolve. When I first came in the provost role, I was responsible for, we created at Purdue what we called the Equity Task Force. And that was a major undertaking after some of the civil unrest that we've experienced here in the United States. The university really began to focus on Black Boilermaker success. And I was responsible for the undergraduate experience to create that sense of belonging, that sense of community on the campus. And we have invested heavily in the Equity Task Force, both as it related to student recruitment and retention programs, and also faculty. We did some cluster hiring in faculty. And then this past summer in July, we have had a regional campus called IUPUI, which was Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis, IUPUI. That campus underwent a separation. So the IU separated from the Purdue, and now we will birth or launch a new campus in August of this year, Purdue in Indianapolis. So I've been appointed to do some community engagement with the new campus coming to the Indianapolis community. It's really interesting in that the neighborhood in which IUPUI sits was in a historically Black neighborhood. And due to gentrification, a lot of the African Americans were displaced. Indiana Avenue is was a very vibrant community for the African American experience. Madam C.J. Walker had her manufacturing plant there on Indiana Avenue, was known for a variety of jazz musicians, literary artists. It was just a very vibrant hub within the African American community. And when the university decided to build not only the university, but also I-65, which is a major highway, came through that community and unfortunately decimated it. A lot of the homes were sold below cost. And there's still that memory because it was, just 50 years ago. So that memory is still present in many folks' mind. And my responsibilities now are to develop positive relationships with our stakeholders in the community and do it in an authentic and trustworthy way. And it's been an exciting time because I think that it's an opportunity for some rebirth, for us to bring some economic revitalization to the community, and also recognize the assets that the community has. For so long, the narrative has not always been a positive one, but we have what I believe is a phenomenal opportunity to continue to highlight and develop the community and provide not only a historical perspective, but to do it in a contemporary way. Madam C.J. Walker was an entrepreneur. Can we bring economic redevelopment back to the city in the Madam C.J. Walker way. So that's what I'm doing now, along with developing the K through 12 pipeline, because we know that there is tremendous work to do to ensure that our students, particularly students of color, are prepared academically for the rigor of higher education, and making sure that we have algebra by 7th and they're calculus ready by college and those types of things.
Okay. So you have been at Purdue, now well over 30 years. When you think about the leadership role that you had and the one that you transitioned to, but you were also a leader in other places long before you came to Purdue. And so just over the course of your career, can you talk a little bit about, if at all, there was a role that individualized mentorship played in your career?
Yes, and I'll speak to it from two different venues. One is the mentors that I received in terms of mentorship, and then also the role that I think that we all play in higher education to mentor and prepare the next generation of leaders. I feel like I've been very fortunate in that I have developed some relationships through my professional organizations, primarily in terms of some of the mentorship that I received, particularly when I was in the Black Cultural Center director role. There's a National Association of Black Cultural Centers, and I found that group to be sort of my, oh gosh, shot in the arm. I mean, I looked forward to the conferences every year annually, because I knew that whenever I stepped into the conference, that I would be affirmed and my work would be affirmed in ways that sometimes we don't always get in our own home community. So those individuals became very strong mentors for me. And then I was deliberate in that I sought out some mentorship on my campus as well, through different leaders. And to be quite honest, sometimes that was a little bit more challenging, because I was very cautious about how much vulnerability I wanted to exhibit with those
Yes.
mentor relationships.
Mhm.
Whereas when it was my colleagues from another institution, I could call up the phone and say, girl, let me tell you what just happened. And,
Yes.
go through it, where I was much more protected
Yeah.
in terms of how much emotion I wanted to exhibit in some of those mentors that were closer to the campus community. And then
Mm.
finally, the students. As I transition into this current position, one of the things that I grieve the most is the interaction with students, or I should say the lack of interaction with students. So I've been very intentional in that when I meet with first year students, to offer them the opportunity to become a mentor for them, or to uh, seek out opportunities to really bring someone under my wing. And I usually have a group of about 4 or 5 individuals that I'm very intentional with, providing them recommendations, letters of recommendation, nominating them for awards, those types of things, I think are very important. And it's amazing to me sometimes to hear the students um, not necessarily believe in themselves the way in which I believe in them, and
Mhm.
to really push them out on the edge and say, you can do this. And that they sometimes lack the confidence, and then they come back and say, you know what, that was wonderful. I'm glad I took advantage of it. And I wouldn't have done that if you didn't nominate me, or if you didn't say you should apply for this particular thing.
I love it. Lifting as we climb, right?
Yes.
Thank you for that. Can you share if in your leadership journey there were any executive development programs that you participated in that helped, make you an even more successful candidate for some of the roles that you've had, or has it, been your ingenuity, your talent, your time and treasure, and the skills that you've cultivated over the years of leadership for you?
Yes. At the time that I was seeking out some opportunities, I didn't realize that it was intentional. I think it was sort of, oh, here's an opportunity, let me take advantage of it. And then I
Okay.
became the benefactor of the fact that I stepped out and made myself available. So one in particular was an on-campus opportunity. It was called the Council for Manager Development. and it
Mm,
was a group of about 15 mid-level professionals, and we learned, quote unquote, the Purdue way. I always tell new employees there's a right way and there's a wrong way, and then there's the Purdue way, and you need to learn the Purdue way.
mhm,
And that Council for Manager Development taught us skills, something, one of the workshops was on negotiation. How do you negotiate?
okay,
Another one was how do you, I don't remember the exact catalog of activities, but the Council on
mhm,
Manager Development was an internal one.
okay,
Externally, I was nominated to participate in the HERS Academy, and it's the Higher
mm,
Education Leadership Development for Women
mhm,
program at Bryn Mawr College. It's a summer program. I think it was probably 6 or 8 weeks during the summer. It was a huge time commitment, but it provided me an opportunity to begin to think about, what is my vision? How do I champion myself? How do I champion others? What are some of the transformations that I need to undergo? And really was an opportunity to do a lot of self-reflection and be in a room with some powerful women who were, I would say, standing on our tippy toes in anticipation of what's next, and being able
okay.
to be in a space in which you could float some ideas up and get some feedback and not feel intimidated by going through that process.
Mm, mm, okay. So in addition to it sounds like your institution provided professional development training and you did participate in executive leadership development. Can you talk a little bit about how your academic background has prepared you for the work that you're doing now? Even though your leadership roles have changed over time, are you able to trace uh, elements in your academic background that have prepared you for where you are today?
Yes, I did my undergraduate degree in African American Studies
Mhm.
and political science, and then my graduate work was in can't get it out, higher education administration with a focus on student affairs.
Mm.
So when I was at the Black Cultural Center, the degree in African American Studies was utilized regularly because that's what we did at the Black Cultural Center. We educated students in the community about the African American experience. So it was definitely a solid foundation that I utilized on a regular basis and continue to grow as it relates to the repertoire of the African American experience. And then student affairs, higher education administration, that served me very well. I think that I too have been blessed in that my experiences have propelled me into some leadership roles that I don't have a PhD degree, but yet I am in a senior leadership role. And I
Mhm.
recognize that as well. And I think it's because of the experiences
Mm,
and the on-the-job training, the commitment to the profession
mhm.
provided me with these particular opportunities.
Okay. Earlier, you talked about how in your current leadership role, it continues to expand in great ways, right? And that one of the things that you're doing now is thinking about this pipeline development of students in the K-12 12th year system. And so we all know we're facing, so the national conversation is about this enrollment cliff that we're
Yes.
facing come 2026. And so can you talk about maybe some of the things in your current leadership role that you're doing, to kind of think about that? And I want to tie in the arts piece, right? Because that is part of your background. So this slight two-part question, right? To address the enrollment cliff in 2026, but also how are you continuing, if it's within your capacity to do so, to promote the value of the arts, broadly speaking. Although most of us coming to this conversation and through ATHA, are coming primarily through theater. There's no art form that theater doesn't engage in, no conversation that those of us who love theater and make theater can't participate in. And so I just think of the arts broadly. How are
Yeah.
you, continuing to maintain and promote the value of that in your work?
Mhm. That's a great question, particularly the fact that I am housed or employed at Purdue University, which is a very STEM oriented campus.
Mhm,
Science,
mhm,
engineering, technology, that's what Purdue
mhm,
is known for, not necessarily the arts. However, we know that the arts play a critical role in the success of our students. So I'm going to sort of tease that question out in a few different ways. This notion of the enrollment cliff.
mm,
Um, I think that we always talk about how students are not prepared for the rigor of higher education, or our educational system is not preparing our students adequately, that conversation. So trying to figure out ways in which we can play a more active role in developing that pipeline, I think is important. The
okay.
other piece that I don't think we talk about and we need to have conversations about is that it's not necessarily that students aren't prepared for the university, but to flip that narrative and say the university is not prepared to receive the students that K through 12 is producing.
Mhm. I love it.
And I don't think that we ever switch that narrative, because
Mm,
we are missing out on so many hundreds of thousands of students. We talk about this enrollment cliff. Are we going into these rural communities and recruiting students? Are we committed to our first generation college students and making sure that we have the necessary support and wraparound services to ensure that they thrive? I feel that institutionally, sometimes we do a disservice to our students whenever we invite them to come to campus and know that they may not be as prepared as we would like them to be. And then
mhm,
they leave the institution, as opposed to us saying, you know what? We want these first generation students, or we want these urban students, and we know that we need to change the way in which we deliver our education
mhm,
so that they can be successful.
mhm,
We don't always do that, and I think we need to do a better job with that. The arts, I think that there's, such huge opportunities to use the arts to prepare students and to utilize the arts to introduce higher education to them. I think about some of the programs that I've been involved with, particularly summer camp for high school students and summer camp for middle school students, in
mhm,
which we use the arts to develop their confidence. We use the arts to develop their communication skills. We use the arts to provide them an opportunity to public speak. I mean, there's but we don't always make those connections that we should be making. And I think that, even through song and dance, students can learn mathematical equations and ways in which, they wouldn't have otherwise. So we can really get creative about how we do course instruction through the arts as well.
mm. Love it, love it. Okay, so this next question is in response to something that I read in a book called, the title of this particular chapter is called Narrating Administration of the book. So You Want to Be a Dean. So the author writes here, and I quote, the roles that prepare faculty to administer also prepare them to minister. We indeed learn how to manage, distribute, and organize, but also how to care for and attend to, right, individuals. So I like this idea. I really, really do, of thinking about leadership as a form of ministry. Do you see your work at all similarly? And if so, what does ministry, and this word for me is more about care, right? So if you see your leadership as a form of ministry, i.e., care, what does that look like on a
Ah,
day-to-day basis?
that's I love that analogy. And yes is the short answer to it. I'm thinking about even our office name. We recently changed it was the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and
Mhm.
we made a conscious decision to add the word belonging to the
Yes.
title. So it's the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging.
Mhm.
And belonging is about how do you develop a sense of community for students where they see themselves, and not only see themselves in terms of faculty and administrators, but they see themselves being able to excel at the institution. How do
Mhm.
we create an environment of belonging in such a way that students can be their authentic self? and not
Mhm.
have to wear the mask, so to
Yeah.
speak. How do we create community so that students can find others who have similar beliefs and values that they do, that they may have, and then how do we expand that to others? So yes, I do see it as a ministry to some degree, and it's amazing to see students be able to thrive when they find their community. We know that students have a greater retention rate and sense of belonging whenever they have that community. And
Mhm.
sometimes we don't always permit those communities to exist and thrive. And how might we be able to break down some of those barriers and give people permission to be their authentic selves?
Yes. So you've used this word authenticity twice, which leads right into my very next question, which is how do you navigate um, self-authenticity in your leadership at your current institution? And what I mean by that is how do you show up where it's your whole self that is showing up in the space that you occupy?
Yeah. That was, I think it, I think for me, the authentic self comes with time. Um, I think that I was privileged in that I was in an environment at the Black Cultural Center where it wasn't as questionable in terms of bringing your authentic self to work every day because you were surrounded with people who looked like you. You didn't have to justify your existence on a day-to-day basis.
Mm.
And now I'm operating in a space in which it's clear that oftentimes I'm the only female in the room. I'm the only person of color in the room sometimes. And I am much more conscious of bringing my authentic self to those spaces than what I was when I was at the Black Cultural Center, because it was much more
Mhm.
natural to be authentic in a space in which everybody was of similar background and origin.
Mhm.
Um, I also am very conscious too that sometimes, and this is where I sort of walk the tightrope and struggle a little bit. Sometimes I wish that I was not the person that always had to bring up or to defend or to articulate a need for us to have inclusive conversations, or to think about, as we're making decisions, how might this impact a community?
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes it's weary work, and he's like, gosh, does anybody else not see this as an issue? And you're hoping that there will be an advocate or an ally in the room that will speak up, and that doesn't always happen. But I feel that it's not only my responsibility to be authentic to who I am, but also to articulate and make sure that people are understanding how decisions may impact different communities in different ways and have that level of sensitivity.
Mm. Yes. You use the word weary. Sometimes the work is wearisome, right? So my last two questions before I open it up to our guests are around wellness and flourishing, right? I'm
Mhm.
currently taking leadership development courses at my current institution, and I've heard this particular presentation twice now on wellness, which is, why it's one of my questions that I, want to offer to you here this evening. How do you model wellness in your leadership?
I model it in a few different ways. I'll give some examples. I have a colleague that sometimes emails at 9 o'clock at night,
Mhm.
may email at 5 o'clock in the morning. And here I am reading those emails at 9 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock in the morning. And I sent an email back and said, I noticed you email me sometimes at 9 o'clock at night and 5 in the morning. That's okay. But I want to encourage you to pause
Mhm.
and not feel like you have to be on the job all the time. And I wrote that back to her in an email, and I'm thinking, I need to take my own advice because here I am checking my email at 5:30 in the morning. But she responded and said, I really appreciate the fact that you encourage me not to have to always be on all the time. The other example is that my child is an adult child now, but it wasn't unusual for me to be at work 8 or 9 o'clock at night, because it's the arts. We do things in the evening,
Right.
but I sometimes would invite my child to be at work with me, so that folks knew that I was a mom too, in addition to being a professional in the arena that I was in. Um, and I think that it's important to sort of take time out for yourself. I I'm a tea drinker. I'm not a coffee drinker. I'm a tea drinker. And there's a group of women that get together on a monthly basis and we go out to tea parties in town, sometimes out of town, sometimes over Zoom. So I use that teacup analogy that you can't always pour out. You have to pour in as well
Mm,
and figure out how, and what do I need to do to pour into myself.
mhm,
I this past year, I actually went on, I convinced myself that I wanted to try something new and different at least one time, one new thing a month, not every day, but just once a month, do something that you've never done before. One of the things that I did that, now that's something that I would have never done before. I went to a Becoming an Outdoor Woman class. I skinned an alligator and was in the woods and shot a gun for the first time. Those are
okay.
things that I never would have imagined that I would do before, but made a commitment to say, you know what, do something new and different and experience nature in a way in which you haven't done it before. And I found that to be refreshing. I mean, for me personally, getting in touch with nature, it might just be planting tulip bulbs in the fall and knowing that they're going to bring me joy in April when they pop out of the ground and start blooming. But
Mm,
those types of things, that self-care is so important for me.
yes. Which I think is a beautiful way to dovetail into my last question, which is, and I want to give credit here publicly. This question is very much informed by the work of Dr. Kelly Crace, who is the current director of our Wellness Center at William and Mary. And I heard this question a few times, but this most recent time I heard it in such a different way, that I wanted to bring it into this conversation, and I will bring it into future conversations. But the question here is, how do you flourish while being affected by too muchness and absurdity, right? And the second part to that question is, how do you bring your values as an individual, which I'm sure are shaping your leadership, to the foreground in a healthy way, especially when we're, in the midst of absurdity and too muchness?
Too muchness. I love that. And so appropriate for for today. I have been in a lot of too muchness. um, I when I find myself in that space, I I try to center myself on gratefulness, and
Mm,
that no matter what's going on in my life, how can I be grateful for whatever it is? And I find that centering for me personally is to say that, you know what, I'm grateful. I have a job that I go to every day that I enjoy. Some people don't get up in the morning and enjoy the work that they do. And the fact that I do, I need to be grateful for that. I need to
mm,
be grateful for the fact that, I'm still collecting a paycheck. COVID didn't wipe me out, type of
mm,
thing, and really try to center myself on this notion of gratefulness and the values question.
mm,
Uh, Integrity is something that I really value. Integrity, not only from a fiscal integrity standpoint of view, whenever I'm making budgetary decisions
right.
administratively, but integrity in terms of credibility of who I am and what I believe. That's a value that is difficult for me whenever people don't exhibit it,
Mhm.
and trying hard to, I'm a woman of faith as well, and I think that that centers me too, and I'm not fearful about bringing my full self to work, and that, sometimes I'm sitting in a meeting, people think I'm doing whatever. They don't know I'm in prayer because I I need support and help that to allow me to shut my mouth when I need to shut my mouth. So, those values of the spirituality piece, that integrity piece, and when there's too muchness going on, to be grateful, and see the flip it in such a way that it becomes a positive as opposed to a
Mhm.
negative.
I like that. Flip it in such a way that it becomes a positive as opposed to the negative or a negative. Um, thank you. Thank you for all that you've shared in this way. Are there any maybe closing thoughts that you have on leadership? The reason that I'm curating this series is because I want to have this conversation with different leaders so that over time, the members of ATHA and those who may not be members of ATHA, but who may watch this on the replay, can see that leadership looks different for different leaders, that their pathway to leadership is very different. And sometimes we don't get to have those level of conversations about how did you transition from doing this, such as many of us are in the classroom, right? But how do we transition from the classroom all the way up to cabinet, right? And
Yes.
so, as a senior leader, um, oh, we do have a question, but I'll I'll finish this.
Yeah. I
Um,
think, one of my favorite songs is "The Best Is Yet to Come."
I-
Uh, and I think that sometimes we are comfortable in our positions and we don't always expand our opportunities. And to be able to say, you know what, the best is yet to come, even though you think you got it good now,
mm,
know that the best is yet to come, meaning that there's something in your future, and being able to seek those opportunities as they avail themselves and take advantage of them. Um, and, sort of, as I said it earlier, stand on your tippy toes in anticipation of what's next and learn, not learn, use yes in your vocabulary more than no, will be my other piece of advice, because sometimes we talk ourselves out of opportunities and positions because we think, oh, well, I don't know if I'm ready for this, or we have that chatter going in our ears. And I think that if we just pause and say yes, we'll be surprised at what avails itself.
mm, Wonderful. I want to just enter into this space. It wasn't a question, but it was a statement of a gratitude from Anne Elizabeth Armstrong, who says, "Thank you for the discussion. They like hearing about your path at Purdue and how the arts were very much a part of that." So thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for your time this evening, both our guest, Renee Thomas, and those of you who are joining us here. Uh, Live, and those who are going to catch us on the replay, thank you too for tuning in. And until the next time, have a good evening.